recording so that this is available after today. And on that note, we will be sharing the slide deck and the recording. All of that stuff will be posted on our website after the event. Probably not today, but sometime next week we'll be posting the content so everybody can have access to the resources, and those will also be emailed out to all the attendees. So be on the lookout for that. Today's agenda, so starting with our welcome in just a few minutes, we're going to jump right into the content. Today is ELO-P nuts and bolts, and so for those of you that joined us in spring, some of the content will likely be very similar, but we know that there's a lot of moving parts, and hearing information more than once can be very helpful, and we'll be expanding with the current context. Around 11:10, we will have a transition and a little short break. And so you'll be invited into regional breakout spaces. So you'll actually have time to connect with folks from our system of support for expanded learning in regional teams. So you'll get to meet folks that can help you on a day-to-day basis. And then we will end our session today at noon. Feel free to engage with us on social media. We use the hashtag CAELO program. So if you are posting anything about today's event or in general, just talking about ELO-P, feel free to use this hashtag. And this is day one. So we're kicking off with nuts and bolts. We do have 3 other fantastic sessions coming up. So tomorrow we'll be jumping into learning about creating conditions for children to thrive. And then next week, we'll talk about supporting early learners. And then session 4, our last session for this academy, will be about supporting LEA leaders and is primarily for LEA folks. And so you can, if you haven't signed up for the other sessions, would love to have you join us. Information will be dropped into the chat box. And if you found this one, you can probably find those pretty easily as well. Also, office hours. So for those of you that have not joined us yet for office hours, we do host fairly regular office hours. The California AfterSchool Network, in partnership with the California Department of Education, hosts these, and we have a lot of members of our system of support that participate in these. And so our last summer office hours session wraps up this Friday. So if you're like, oh, I have lots of questions after today, come to office hours on Friday. It's a very interactive open space for questions and dialogue. And we just released the fall office hour schedule. So there will be days in October through December that you can sign up for that as well. And then also, if you want to stay in touch and you're not already signed up, definitely encourage you to sign up for our CAN listserv. Excuse me, and access other contact information and resources. All right, so we are going to jump right into the content now. So like I said, day one, ELO-P nuts and bolts. Today, your presenters, you already met Tiffany Gipson, our Director for Equity and Quality at the California AfterSchool Network, or we call ourselves CAN for short. We'll also be joined by Sterling Williams, who's a consultant in the Expanded Learning Division at CDE, and then myself, Heather Williams, the Director of Policy and Outreach here at CAN. So with that, I will jump right in. So content for today, we will be covering a few things. The basics of expanded learning. What is expanded learning? How is it funded? And then digging into more specifically the ELO-P funding source and basics about that funding source. Some of the hot topics that have been coming up in terms of implementing ELO-P and other expanded learning programs. And then we'll share a few resources. We'll be sharing resources along the way, but we'll definitely have some resources at the end to share out. And then, like I said, we'll close out the main session and have an opportunity to transition to the regional breakouts. So today's learning structure, we really encourage you all, we do this as a meeting as opposed to a webinar. So you can see people's faces. I'm looking at a lot of faces. It's really great. Love to have so many of you here with us, but you can engage in the chat. So you have access to the chat, share ideas, thoughts, resources, promising practices as we're talking through topics. Feel free to share in your own experiences, what you have been learning along the way. Part of this process is really learning from others, right? We're here to help as much as we can, but learning from peers is essential. And so really invite you to share out what you're learning in that way with folks. And then capturing personal reflections and a copy of this Google Doc. So in a moment, some folks from my team will drop this link into the chat. And it's just a Google Doc. It's a forced copy. So when you open it up, it's your own personal copy. It has the reflection questions for today. And you can take notes. So we'll have some time throughout the session. We'll pause, we'll offer some reflection questions, and just to get you thinking about the content. And so you're welcome to take notes along the way in that Google Doc if that format works for you. If it doesn't, feel free to use something else. And if you are so inclined, feel free to share your reflections in the chat box. Again, we really learn from one another. So sharing your reflections in the chat box is a great way to connect with one another. And then lastly, the facilitated regional breakouts at the end. And folks, friendly reminder to mute yourself if you're not already muted. We'll try to make sure we mute attendees, but please double check that you're muted. All right, so these are some overarching questions to consider just throughout the entire session. So as we go through, just thinking about the content, what stands out from today, taking note of key phrases and quotes, things that you want to reflect back or remember after today, what's inspiring to you. Hopefully for those of you that have been in Expanded Learning, you know this is a really inspiring field to work in. And while we'll be talking about some nuts and bolts and basic concepts, hopefully this is still inspiring for you and getting to the root of why we do this work. How does this impact how you think about your work and or your role? And what are strategies from today that you might implement within your own expanded learning programs? And then, like I said, we'll be covering content, but there is a lot of in the weeds questions and things that come up, and you might have a really, really specific scenario and you're like hoping for an answer today, and we probably won't get to it today, or at least in this main session. So invite you, these are some resources and opportunities to get more granular, get in the weeds, work out some of those tough questions. So reviewing the CDE FAQs, joining office hours that we already talked about, reaching out to the CDE help desk if you otherwise still have questions, engaging with our system of support, and watching fireside chats. We have a couple that just came out about recent technical changes in terms of the ELO-P funding, so those are great resources. All right, so starting with the most basics, what is expanded learning? So I invite you all, probably most of you have something that comes to mind when you think of expanded learning. So invite you all to just take a moment, and when you hear the phrase expanded learning, what comes to mind? What do you think of? How do you define expanded learning? And just reflect on that for a moment. If you feel brave enough to share out, feel free to drop what comes to mind in the chat box. Would love to know what some of you all are thinking about when you hear the phrase expanded learning. And thanks, Joe, for getting the conversation started and seeing folks starting to drop stuff in. So feel free to continue to drop in your thoughts in the chat box. So we start with this picture a lot because we want to be really clear that expanded learning is an integral component of transforming California schools. So expanded learning in and of itself is a really important opportunity, but it also supports and is integral in this larger vision that the state has for transforming schools. And so while it's a sometimes talked about a time and place, it really is an essential strategy to work with all of your other strategies. It shouldn't be operated in a silo off to the side. This is something that is really front and center for how you meet the needs of your students, of your community, of your families. And then this is the vision that has been actually outlined for expanded learning for quite a while. Expanded learning programs are an integral part of young people's education, engaging them in year-round learning opportunities that prepare them for college, career, and life. And prior to COVID, there was actually 4,500 sites serving over 980,000 students every year across the state. So this map is from pre-pandemic and just kind of shows how many programs existed previously, pre-COVID, with ACES and 21st Century. And as you all probably know by now, with ELO-P, there's a lot more programs and a lot more students being served, and we already had a robust system beforehand as well. So we've kind of referenced this a few times, and we'll keep referencing this, but we've had this system in place for quite a while now. We do have the system of support for expanded learning, also referred to as the SSEL. This is a group of folks that are growing in size. I think we're up to about 90, 100 folks total that are part of the system, that are really here to support you, to provide technical assistance, to really ensure that you are able to build out quality programs to support students. So it consists of our CDE Expanded Learning Division folks, 16 county offices of education, the California After-School Network team, our what we call our cousins, the ASAP Connect team. We are the 2 statewide TA intermediaries. And then also, as a part of the county office structure, there are SSEL STEAM hubs who specifically provide support around quality STEAM opportunities. All right, so jumping in a little bit more about expanded learning. Expanded learning does have a technical definition, that it's a legal definition. It's in California Education Code. Instead of just posting a block of text, we really wanted to break this down in terms of what it says. It talks about when it happens, which is before and after school, summer, and intersession. So for a long time, our field was kind of referred to as after school, but we know this happens in other places and times as well. And during COVID, we know that it wasn't even limited to this, right? Expanded learning was taking place at all sorts of times. And so we know it can be more than just this, but technically we talk about it in terms of this is when expanded learning opportunities take place, what academic, social, emotional, and physical needs and interests of students. And the opportunity should be hands-on, engaging, student-centered, results-driven, involve community partners, and complement learning activities in the regular school day and year. And so I know a lot of you, some of what you were putting into the chat really reflected what's in this definition, this technical definition. And just want to highlight, right, we specifically use the term expanded learning because we talk about expanding the learning opportunities that students have. This is not an extension of the school day, but really an expansion and building on what happens in the regular school day, but providing opportunity to so many more things as well. And so I know some of you use the phrase extended learning. We try to encourage you to move towards talking about it in a more expansive way, or referring to it as expanded learning. It really is not meant to extend instructional time, but again, to expand on it. And then a really crucial resource to help with this was released almost 10 years ago. This was a field-based process that came together and said, what do quality programs look like in California? And so this process was led by CAN and CDE, but brought together folks from all across the field, practitioners who were already running high quality programs. And they spent a lot of time talking about what they already do that supports quality outcomes for our students in these programs. And so they came up with these 12 quality standards. And if you're not familiar with them yet, you will hopefully become very familiar with them soon. We break them into two categories. The first is point of service. And so we have 6 point of service quality standards. Those are, you'll see those up there: safe and supportive environment, active engaged learning, skill building, youth voice and leadership, healthy choices and behaviors, diversity, access, and equity. And so those really talk about what happens at the point of service with students and staff. And then we also have the other 6 quality standards that are programmatic, and this talks about what needs to happen at the programmatic level to ensure those point of service quality standards can happen. So having quality staff, a clear vision, mission, and purpose, the importance of collaborative partnerships, engaging in continuous quality improvement, program management, and sustainability. Sustainability, we're helped a lot with that with the ELO-P dollars. That definitely helps ensure our programs can stay more sustainable, but each of these quality standards is really important. When you access this presentation, there's a little video that you can watch that is about 11-12 minutes long, and it's really great and talks about how the quality standards were created in more detail, why they're important, and so forth. But the team has been dropping in links in the chat box to different resources around the quality standards. And Tiffany's team has been hard at work putting together more resources to support the field in terms of assessing quality, looking at quality on your site. How do you build out quality programs? How do you engage in a continuous quality improvement process? So be on the lookout for more resources there. And then the last thing I want to talk about before I turn it over to Sterling and we get more specifically into ELO-P is just how are these programs funded broadly? So a lot of folks are aware of Expanded Learning now because of ELO-P, but there have been other funding sources that have supported these programs for quite a number of years. And so in California, we are fortunate to have the ACES funding, or After School Education and Safety Program. This is state funding, it's ongoing funding. It supports students in TK through 8/9. It's a competitive application, school-based awards. Many of you are familiar with ACES, had ACES prior to ELO-P, and so you likely know a little bit about that. If you don't, we can definitely talk more about it in other spaces, but that has been really the primary funding source in California for programs up until ELO-P. And then we've got our ELO-P dollars that are also state dollars, also ongoing dollars that support primarily TK through 6 students. They're different in that it's a formula-based apportionment versus a competitive application. And that was just put into place recently. We also leverage federal dollars. So we have the 21st Century programs, 21st Century Community Learning Centers. There's both an elementary middle program and an assets program, which is our high school program. Those are also ongoing. They are both competitive applications and site-based awards. All 3 of these funding sources can work together to run a comprehensive expanded learning program. And so that's why we talk about it's really important to understand the funding landscape, because if you got ELO-P dollars, you'll want to know if your district has access to ACES or 21st Century so that you're not starting from scratch, but you're really looking at how all of these funding sources work together holistically to support expanded learning in your districts. And then also at the bottom, you'll see a reference to ELO-G. We know this causes a lot of confusion in the field. We did not name them. That we were not involved in how they chose to name these 2 programs, but the ELO-G was the Expanded Learning Opportunity Grant. This was a result of COVID relief dollars. It's federal and state dollars one time that needs to be spent this year, and some of the deadlines are next year. The funding can go to support expanded learning as well as some other learning opportunities for students. So it is not solely for expanded learning, despite the name. but you can supplement your expanded learning programs through use of these one-time funds as well. And just super important to mention this is that, you know, the funding for ELO-P continues at $4 billion. So this is the second year we're in that it's at $4 billion. The intent is still that the program eventually grows to $5 billion. But this is the second year in a row where the state is set at a total amount of $4 billion for ELO-P. All right, so that's the end of our first section. So I'm about to turn it over to Sterling, but before I do that, we have a couple reflection questions. And so again, you can use your note stock. You can, if you feel so inclined, share something in the chat box. But just thinking about what quality standards are you already focused on in your programs? What have you, what do you do well? What do you think you've already got kind of established? And then are there ones you might focus on in this year or the coming year, next year? And then what funding sources do you currently leverage to support expanded learning opportunities? Could you leverage others? Are you running ELO-P and had no idea that your district might already have access to ACES in 21st century? Do you need to kind of go back and look at your funding and see what funding sources that you have already available to you? And I see a few brave souls dropping in some comments in the chat box. Quality staffing, I seeing that as a trend. So thank you for sharing. And Sterling, gonna turn it over to you to talk about your favorite subject, ELO-P basics.
Team, we need to unmute Sterling.
Sterling, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you. In that moment, I wish I knew magic. I could have grabbed some cards and done some things. Thank you, Heather, for setting us up there, giving us some of the breakdown for ELO-P and just expanded learning in general. Also want to give a thanks to the SSEL, our system of support for expanded learning, that is keeping the chat very active and answering questions and providing a lot of documentation and resources. This is a point in time where we like to remind everyone the recording will be available, the resources will be available. So if there are things that you're not picking up or you want to go back and look at, those things will be available next week. So getting into the specifics of ELO-P, we like to start with just the intent, right? Expanded learning has been seen as a pillar in education for some time. And with this program, billions of dollars have been put into education, and specifically for expanded learning. And it's been done so in the form of an apportionment. So this is different than the grants that we formerly had and continuously have with ACES in 21st century. An apportionment goes directly to the LEA. So there isn't an application process. This is for LEAs that are serving students that are in person and are unduplicated pupils. So this is an opportunity for all those LEAs that maybe didn't have an opportunity to participate in ACES in 21st century in the past, now are given that funding and now can really provide a lot of new opportunities and just new learning experiences for kids, and specifically noting for TK through 6. Some of the key details, this was announced back in May of 2021. Again, this is ongoing funding. So since 2021, LEAs have been receiving apportionments to provide these opportunities for kids. There have been opportunities to spend funding since that time, and then also an extension in funding deadlines to ensure LEAs are are having time to ramp up their programs, to talk to partners, to be innovative, making sure that all the collaborative partners are at the table to really design a program that's going to be beneficial for students. Also noting that this is designed to be one single comprehensive program. So for those of you all that have ACES in 21st century, right, really sitting down and looking at how the funding is coming in, where the dollars are, where you can spend and make a program that meets the needs of all students. And, you know, this is designed specifically for unduplicated pupils. And, you know, those students are students classified as English learners, those that are eligible for free or reduced price meals, and also foster youth. So there's overlap there with ACES in the 21st century and the ELO-P unduplicated pupils. Looking at program elements, right? So there are two major components that needs to be part of your program. Those are educational and literacy, and also educational enrichment. If you're trying to just quickly think about what those mean, the first would be more aligned with what you're seeing in the traditional core day, but also done in a new and exciting way. So STEAM, you heard earlier about the STEAM hubs, right? You're looking at science and math. How do we get students to be interested in this and really getting their attention and excitement? So robotics and coding, all these things that we know that are focused on career development, and then also designed to get students out of the classroom and really thinking about, you know, how this is going to potentially provide a future for them. And then enrichment, right? I like to think of that as just like gym time and everything else, right? So been at programs where they're got something set up almost like CrossFit. There are a lot of things that have been aligned to marathon running, just anything that is outside of kind of what you would think of as the core day. And lastly, to note that snacks and meals are also necessary for the program. So days and hours of operation, these are to take place for all the school days. That's, you know, different for each LEA. We know that there are some charters that have, you know, more or less than 180 days. However many school days you have is for each school day. And to note that this is also in person, right? There's an option to do this before and or after school. That decision we say is based on the needs of the students and families. So there are definitely those communities that need support in the morning hours, and then also some that just need it after school. So really just taking time to get that feedback, whether that's through surveys, phone calls, emails, just really knowing the pulse of your families to determine when you're going to be providing these opportunities. And these should be no less than 9 hours. So your core day plus the expanded learning opportunity should equal 9 hours. In addition, you'll be doing this on non-school days in person for at least 30 days for no less than 9 hours. And this is inclusive of the extended school year days and Saturdays. In person, again, just making sure that folks are aware that, you know, this is something that takes place in person and not virtual. However, if your program would like to use a virtual component to enhance the program, they can do so. So for example, if there's a staff member in the space with students, you can use something from YouTube or some online source to help facilitate the classroom. I went to visit a site several months ago and they were doing Pixar and doing art. And there was someone that was kind of teaching the art piece, and the facilitator was going around and supporting students through that process. And lastly, that attendance is based on individual needs of students and their family, and that's not something that is required going forward. So making sure that when students are joining their program, right, if they can only come 3 days, then they can only come 3 days. Sometimes those are the students that need the program the most because they don't have that stability. And then moving on to Frontier, the major difference here is that the requirements are for 8 hours instead of 9. right? So the same calculations for the non-frontier are here for frontier. It's just that they have 8 hours. And just noting that frontier designated geographic location means a school site in an area that has a population density of less than 11 hours per square mile. Also noting that we have FAQs available walking through frontier requirements and also how to identify whether or not you have a location that is considered frontier. So looking at who's able to participate, in short, all students, right? And we normally get questions about whether fees are okay. They are. However, LEAs cannot charge homeless youth, foster youth, or students that are eligible for free and reduced price meals. And lastly, making sure that if you are implementing some sort of family fee, that it's on a sliding scale and based on the family's ability to pay. For staffing requirements, this is similar to ACEs and 21st, being that the ratio is 20 to 1. What's different is TK and K, which is 10 to 1. And that's also for groups that are mixed. So once there is a TK or K student in the space, then it has to be a 1 to 10 ratio. And just to go through this quickly, all staff that directly supervise students must meet the district's qualification for an instructional aid. What we like to note is that districts have the authority to create their instructional aid policy and positions. So there are and can be multiple exams for the different types of instructional aids that an LEA has. So in the past, there may have only been one or a few. And through EdCode, we now understand that LEAs can develop their own to meet the needs of students and to really target the staff that would be best and most influential and beneficial for their program and meeting the needs of students. And collaboration expectations. So mentioned this briefly earlier, but really just in order to get the best out of your program and using the funding, you want to take time to work on that program plan and make sure that you're getting all of the partners at the table. So this could be having communication with CBOs, community-based organizations, anything that's in the neighborhood that could provide fun and enriching opportunity for kids, and then also some of the childcare providers that are already supporting youth. And we say especially those that are state and federally subsidized programs, such as the CSPP or the California State Preschool Program. And just an additional note about the funding, Heather showed this on multiple graphs so that you can look at the comparison to ELO-G and then also ACEs in 21st century. But again, just stating that the total ongoing funding now is $4 billion. It's set to be at about $5 billion in 25-26. So again, this is funding that LEAs can count on as being there as a source of funding for supporting students, right, for these expanded learning opportunities. And this funding is based off the LEA's unduplicated pupil percentage, right? And so that definition we showed before, what those students are, really making sure you're creating space for English learners, foster youth, and then students that are eligible for free and reduced price meals. And also there's within this $4 billion is a $5 million amount that's given to county offices of ed to provide ELO-P technical assistance, evaluation, and training services, right? So you've seen in the chat populated the SSEL that represents our county offices that are here to support you as you get into more nuanced conversations. How does it specifically support your LEA? What are the things you'd like to do? Really getting into the fine details. And again, this slide deck will be made available, so you'll be able to access your apportionment amount by clicking this link here. Program plan. So I briefly mentioned this a moment ago. This is considered a living document. It is based on 11 of the 12 quality standards. Sustainability is not included, as we believe and have been told that this program is going to be ongoing. So that quality standard isn't needed for the program plan. But this is basically where you start, right? As you're having conversations with your partners, all of your stakeholders, hopefully getting student feedback, parent buy-in, you come together and you kind of build your program here, right? All the things that you may have had on your wish list years ago, but didn't have funding for it, whether you didn't have expanded learning funding at all, or maybe your ACEs in 21st century didn't allow you to kind of dream big. So this is an opportunity to really look at those things, put those on paper, and get the buy-in from your governing board. We say that it's the best practice and in that code to review and update your plan every 3 years. Again, working collaboratively with staff, parents, students, right? All the people that would be involved in this should be at the table and have voice and influence. And this needs to be approved by the LEA's governing board in a public meeting and posted to the LEA's website. So anyone should be able to go onto your website and see what your program plan looks like and what things have been created to support students in this way. And coming down towards the end, a note for compliance and monitoring. This is starting this fiscal year for 23-24. LEAs are subject to program auditing and federal program monitoring review. So just making sure that all LEAs are meeting the requirements that we listed before and doing what's best for kids, right? And more information can be seen on this in the coming months. So that was a lot, right? I'm sure you're happy that this is recorded. We're going to have time to reflect on a few things here. The first, where are you currently at in terms of implementing an expanded learning program, right? Just what's happening, right? What stage are you at? Maybe you've just been hired. We get a lot of those as the year goes on, so we understand and have compassion for just stepping into this space and maybe still taking notes on what expanded learning is, let alone what ELO-P is and what's required. And also, how might you partner with members of your community to build your program, right? So there may be some businesses in the neighborhood, there may be some other programs within your district that are already operating. You know, how are you going to work with them to make sure that you're doing the best that you can with the funding and meeting the needs of parents and staff, and especially students. So if anyone has some of their examples, feel free to drop those in the chat, just as a way to show to some of the new people what's possible, some of the promising practices that they could look at. Amanda, new to the role in learning. Yes, we understand. Here for you. And as we walk and step into hot topics, I'll invite Heather back, and then also Tiffany if she's available.
Thanks, Sterling. And before we jump into this, I will say the chat has been active. Appreciate you all. Appreciate our system of support members who I know are trying to quickly respond to stuff in the chat box. I know I've seen a few things that are not exactly quite right in terms of ratio and attendance requirements and whatnot. And so we'll try to clarify some of that in the next 15 minutes because we're kind of coming up to the close quickly. And just again, a flag for if it doesn't get resolved here, if it doesn't get resolved in the regional breakout in a little bit, definitely come to office hours. Some of you have more nuanced questions and we're like, oh, that's a lot. Definitely come to office hours so we can unpack that. If it's simpler, we're trying to get through them all, but just wanted to flag that before we jump into our hot topics. Back to you, Sterling.
Great. So, hot topics, offer and provide access requirements. I think that, even though this is, one of the fundamental things about the program, we're still getting some questions about this. Heather will probably say a lot of questions about this. So we want to provide some space to kind of unpack it. So I'll read through the definition for offer, and then we'll just, have some commentary. So for offer, this means to recruit, advertise, publicize, or solicit through culturally and linguistically effective and appropriate communication channels. So for me, when I think about this, for offer, I think about just, even some of the electronic ways that this can be done through text messages, right? Through like the Parent Square opportunities. I think about LEAs updating their websites to make sure that it's public for parents to see. I think about emails. What are some things that you all think about, Heather, Tiffany?
Well, I feel like it's that and, right? Like we had people that actually put posters up around the campus. We got people that had like almost tables, like during drop off and pickup. And a lot of it, like you said, what we're clear with folks is that there's no one way to ensure it, but if you can show in good faith that you tried these multiple strategies to ensure that families knew about the opportunity. And the other part I think that's really important that you said is the kind of linguistically effective is critical, right? Acknowledge the kind of cultural differences in your community. So doing something just in English, knowing that you have 3 or 4 different populations that speak a different language means that you may need to get it translated and ensure that that's available to folks, right? So it's all that you said and then even more.
Yep. Yeah, not much more to add. I will say, just because I saw some comments related to this, offer and provide access are very different than a student attending. And right, we can chat more about that, but be very clear, what does it mean to offer and provide access versus student attendance? So keep that in mind as you hear us talking about all of these pieces.
Thank you. So getting into that, right? So provide access, what does that mean? It means to enroll in the ELO-P, right? To enroll in the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program. If a parent or guardian has a signed ELO-P registration form and that form is on file, the student shall be considered enrolled in ELO-P. So again, this is what you were elevating, Heather. Provide access for folks doesn't necessarily go to this definition. I think in their mind, it goes to serving students and their attendance of being within the program and showing up every day. But for purposes of this program, provide access is this definition. Do you want to share anything else about what you've been hearing on office hours?
I will just say, again, because a lot of what's in ed code, what's in compliance requirements, when we talk about what you will be audited on, it's these definitions. So when we talk about provide access, this is the requirement you are expected to meet. So it means to enroll in ELO-P. So does that mean the student has to go every day to be enrolled and have access to the program? No, they just need to be enrolled in the program. I did see someone in the chat that said, like, we reach out to students and basically say, you're enrolled in this program. Every student at the start of the year, you're enrolled, you have access to this program. Fantastic. That's a great way to do it, because we hear a lot of like, can we serve these other students? Can they come to the program if they're not ELO-P students? Yes, you don't have ELO-P students per se. Like literally every student in your school could have access to this program if you set it up that way, and that's a great model. Tiffany, anything?
Yeah, I don't think okay, what y'all said just works, right? I think I got sidetracked because I saw a comment in the chat and it was about, I think some of the confusion around aligning this with the expectations of the ACEs in 21st century opportunities and making sure that people understand that we did do some clarification on attendance requirements for ACEs. So everybody should really look at the FAQ to understand that families can early release from program whenever they need to. Notice the framing, whenever they need to. And so, and what the ELO-P dollars, I mean, the ELO-P students that are enrolled, they count towards your ACEs numbers. So it doesn't work against each other. They can completely work together so that young people have the kind of comprehensive experience that they need. If a family only needs their child to be there 2 days, there's an option for them to come the days that they need. If they need to be there more, there's an option for that as well. And then it's just how is your staffing to be able to hold that, right? So I don't want us to lose track of that either. That was a real concern. And people were like, we don't have enough staff to do things. Well, you can only do what you want. I mean, you can only do what is safe for young people. Hence, someone that said they had a 35-to-1 ratio or that a CBO was thinking about that. That is not what's in ed code. So there may need to be a conversation with that, that particular CBO partner. But yeah, so just thinking about all of those things. Yeah, this is really some no nonsense and really user-friendly policy, which we haven't really seen before. So just elevating that.
No nonsense and user friendly. Those are both things I like to hear. And then just putting a button on the early release policy. If someone could drop the link in the chat to the CDE page that illustrates what those requirements are, that would be great. There's another component to providing access, and that's transportation. We heard from ledge staff that, the purpose of this program was to provide these opportunities, and they didn't want transportation to be a barrier, right? And so this is where that comes in. If an LEA is operating an ELO-P at all of their sites within the LEA, fantastic, right? This is getting into opportunities or scenarios where LEAs have decided just to operate programming at certain sites, right? And that wouldn't be fair to certain students that couldn't access that. So reading this fully, for an LEA receiving an ELO-P apportionment, transportation shall be provided for any student who attends a school that is not operating an ELO-P to attend a location that is providing an ELO-P and to return to their original location or another location that is established by the LEA. And having conversations with folks, we've seen that this is something that's utilized a lot during summer as they're doing their non-school days, right? And they are creating potentially areas where students are going to their school and then getting transportation from there to another school that's operating the program or to some offsite opportunity that is amazing. So, opening this up, Heather, Tiffany, what are some things that are coming up for you?
I feel like this is a straightforward, no nonsense, right? Like, make sure your students have access to the program. If you're able to run it on all school sites, that's awesome, but we know there's limitations to doing that. And so the alternative is to provide transportation. And this is one of those things I know people have like more nuanced questions about. And so if you have more nuanced questions, again, invite you to like talk about those in your breakout space or bring those to our office hours sessions. And I think we've got 1 or 2 more slides, but we're almost out of time. So these are just a reminder of what the requirements are for this year in terms of offering and providing access. If you have certain unduplicated pupil percentage, there's slightly different requirements. Oh, I see. Sterling, we have to unmute you.
Yep.
So Sterling, anything you want to say about this before we wrap up?
I mean, just knowing your unduplicated people percentage is important. I think I referenced where you can find that in an earlier slide. There's a link. Just click your link. You can see your apportionment amount. There are also ways you can see the principal apportionment breakdown, so you'll know monthly, what the amount is going to be. But again, these are just demonstrating the requirements, right? If you're at or above 75%, you're looking at all students and providing opportunities for any student whose parent or guardian requests access. If you're below 75%, you're looking at all unduplicated pupils, and again, providing access to any unduplicated student whose parent or guardian requests access into the program.
All right. Well, we are, there's a lot to get into here. And I know if we had more time, we were going to get into more topics, but I think we wanted to make sure we covered this, and we were working on addressing some of what popped up in the chat box as well. So Sterling and Tiffany, huge appreciation for talking through this. You all have access to the full slide deck after the fact. And so I know we've been dropping in links and you're like, I lost the link. You will definitely get all the links post session. And again, a lot of the folks that are going to be in your breakout spaces will be able to help you connect. Oh, lost my other, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment so I can get our other slide deck up here. It got lost so that we can get you into breakout rooms shortly. So if we were not able to get to your questions in the chat box, I apologize. We were trying to move through them as quickly as possible. Here we go. And we're gonna get into those in just a moment. So just as a reminder, we've been talking about this, we'll keep talking about this. You all have access to the system of support for expanded learning. For those of you that are able to stay on and haven't met with them, you'll meet with them shortly.